My name is Isabel Monroe, and I never imagined I'd learn the truth about my marriage in public. Not quietly, not privately, just right in front of people who would never forget it. If you've ever been pushed aside or told to wait your turn, you'll understand this. Tell me where you're watching from and subscribe if you're ready for the rest. I didn't come to make a scene. I came because he asked me to. The invitation said send-off reception, something small before his short work trip. Scottsdale likes to dress business up as celebration, and this was no different. String lights, catered wine, familiar faces from his firm, a few investors, spouses nodding politely like we all belonged to the same quiet club. I stood near the bar, smoothing the crease in my dress, reminding myself this was just another obligation I'd learned to perform well. He barely looked at me when he arrived. That should have been the first sign. Not a kiss, not a hand on my back. Just a distracted smile, the kind he used when his mind was already elsewhere. He crossed the room quickly, shaking hands, laughing too loud. I watched him from a distance, holding a glass I hadn't tasted, waiting for him to circle back. Instead, I heard my name. Not spoken to me, spoken about me. It came from behind a tall arrangement of flowers near the patio doors. His voice, familiar, relaxed, and a woman's laugh I didn't recognize, low and confident, the kind that didn't ask for permission to exist. "She won't stay long," he said. "She thinks this trip is just work." My stomach tightened, sharp and immediate, like my body understood before my mind did. The woman said something softer, closer to him. I stepped forward without thinking, just enough to hear the rest. "You told her yet?" she asked. A pause. Then him, calm as ever. "We'll talk when I'm back." There it was. Not denial. Not confusion. A plan. The room didn't spin. My knees didn't buckle. I didn't feel dramatic or hysterical or anything like the movie's promised betrayal would feel like. I felt cold. Clear. As if something fragile inside me had snapped cleanly instead of shattering. I stepped around the flowers. He saw me at the same moment the woman did. Her smile froze first. His face followed a second later, eyes widening, mouth parting just enough to tell me he hadn't expected this version of me. Standing, listening, understanding. "For work," I said calmly. "That's what this trip is." People were close enough now to hear us. Conversations slowed, a few heads turned. Scottsdale politeness sharpened into curiosity. He recovered quickly. He always did. "Isabel," he said, lowering his voice like I was the problem. "Not here." I looked at the woman beside him. She was younger than me, polished, wearing the kind of dress you don't choose unless you expect to be seen. She didn't look ashamed. She looked evaluated, like she was deciding if I mattered. That settled something in me. "How long?" I asked him. He sighed, the way he did when negotiations dragged. "This isn't the time." "You already decided the time," I said. "I'm just asking how long." Silence stretched. Someone behind me cleared their throat. I felt eyes on my back, on my face, waiting for emotion, waiting for tears, waiting for me to fall apart so they could justify whatever story they told themselves later. He leaned closer. "Please," he said. "We'll talk when I'm back." I smiled then, not wide, not cruel, just enough to let him know I heard him perfectly. "No," I said. "We won't." His expression tightened. "Isabel." I raised my voice slightly, not enough to shout. Just enough. "You don't get to put me on hold," I said. "You don't get to disappear with her and come back expecting a conversation." A few people shifted uncomfortably. I recognized faces, clients I'd hosted dinners for, wives I'd smiled beside at fundraisers, men who'd shaken my hand and thanked me for supporting his success. Every sacrifice I'd made stood there with me, invisible but heavy. He glanced around, embarrassed now. "Can we please do this privately?" "This," I said, gesturing between him and the woman, "is already public." The woman straightened. "I think maybe we should—" I cut my eyes to her. "No," I said, not unkindly. "You should listen. That surprised her. It surprised him more. I built my life around someone who thought I'd wait quietly while he left, I said. That was your mistake. He reached for my arm. I stepped back. Don't, I said. That word landed harder than anything else I could have said. His hand dropped. I won't beg, I continued. I won't chase, and I definitely won't wait for you to come back and explain why this was necessary for you. His jaw tightened. You're overreacting. That was the moment I felt something shift from pain to certainty. You're right, I said. I'm reacting. I turned to the room, not dramatically, not for sympathy, just to be heard. I won't be here when he gets back, I said. If anyone's wondering. A ripple moved through the crowd. Someone inhaled sharply. Someone else looked down at their drink. I faced him again. You said we'd talk when you're back, I said quietly. What I'm saying now is the last thing you need to hear. His eyes searched my face, finally realizing something had slipped out of his control. Isabel, he said, softer now. Let's not do this. I already did, I replied. I walked away before he could say another word. Past the lights, past the music, past the people who would spend the rest of the night replaying this moment. My hands were steady as I pushed through the door into the warm desert air. Outside, the noise dulled. My phone buzzed in my purse. I didn't check it. I stood there for a second, breathing, feeling the ground under my feet. Not broken, not lost. Decided. I got into my car and closed the door gently, like nothing inside me was rushing anymore. He thought he was leaving and coming back. I was already gone, and as I drove away, one thought stayed with me. Clear, sharp, and unshakable, he took his time. Now I was taking everything else. People think betrayal starts with a kiss or a secret message. It doesn't. It starts with silence you explain away. I met my husband when I was 28. He was ambitious, charming in a measured way. The kind of man who spoke about the future as if it were already scheduled. He didn't promise fantasy. He promised stability. That mattered to me then. I'd grown up watching my mother juggle uncertainty like it was a second job, and I wanted a life that felt anchored. We built it fast. Marriage. A house in Scottsdale that stretched just enough to feel like a rival. A daughter, Maya, who changed the way I measured time. When his career began to climb, mine paused without much discussion. It made sense. I handled the logistics, the schedules, the money. I became the quiet infrastructure that let him move freely. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was choosing us. Some of the money was mine, an inheritance from my grandmother. Nothing flashy, but enough to make our first down payment possible. Enough to stabilize things when his early projects stalled. We folded it into our life, because that's what married people do, or what I thought they did. The warning signs didn't arrive screaming. They slipped in politely. Late nights explained by deadlines. A phone turned face down more often. Trips that used to include me suddenly didn't. When I asked questions, he laughed gently like I was being cute. You worry too much, he'd say. This is just how growth looks. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be the kind of wife who trusted. By the time I noticed patterns, specific days he was unavailable, names he never mentioned, an impatience in his voice when I asked about his schedule, I was already invested in keeping things calm. Peace became a responsibility I carried alone. Maya noticed before I admitted anything to myself. She was 13 when she asked me why her dad stopped coming to her weekend games. He always has meetings, she said once. Not accusing, just observant. Children see consistency like adults see lies. I defended him automatically. Work is busy, I said. It'll slow down. It didn't. The night before the send-off reception, I found his suitcase already packed, not rushed, thoughtful. Clothes I hadn't seen him wear in months. A new cologne. I stood there longer than I needed to, touching the zipper, feeling something settle uncomfortably in my chest. I didn't confront him then. I told myself to wait. I'd been waiting a long time. After I walked out of that reception, I drove to my sister's house. I didn't cry when I told her what happened. I recited it like a timeline. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she nodded once. "Isabel," she said, "this didn't start tonight. I already knew that, but hearing it said out loud mattered." The next morning, Maya came into the kitchen while I was staring at my phone, still unopened messages piling up. She sat across from me, legs tucked under the chair. "Are you leaving him?" she asked. I looked at her then. Really looked. Older than she should have been. Tired of guessing. "I don't know yet," I said carefully. She swallowed. "Mom," she said. "I saw him." The room went quiet, in a way that felt physical. "Where?" I asked. "At the mall," she said. "Last month. He was with a woman. They were holding hands. I didn't say anything because I thought maybe it was complicated." She stared down at the table, embarrassed, like she was the one who'd done something wrong. I reached for her hand. "You didn't imagine it?" I said. She nodded, relief breaking through her composure. "I knew it," she whispered. That was it. Not suspicion, not intuition. Confirmation. This wasn't about my marriage anymore. It was about what I allowed my daughter to learn from watching me. About whether silence was something we passed down like an heirloom. I looked at my phone again. At his messages stacking up. At the life I'd helped build. The finances I'd protected. The stability I'd created. He thought I was reacting to embarrassment. What he didn't understand yet was that I was responding to truth. And truth changes the rules completely. I didn't make a dramatic decision. I made a list. That's how I knew I was done reacting. While he was somewhere between airports and excuses, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open and every document I'd ever organized for our life spread out in front of me. Deeds, account numbers, password managers, insurance policies, trust paperwork tied to my grandmother's inheritance. I'd handled all of it for years, quietly, reliably. Turns out that kind of knowledge becomes power when love leaves the room. The first call I made was to a lawyer. Not the one he'd once joked about using, if things ever got messy, but a woman my sister recommended. Sharp, direct, and uninterested in drama. I didn't cry on the phone. I told her facts, dates, assets, the public incident, the confirmation from my daughter. She paused only once. "Do you want to protect yourself?" she asked. "Or do you want to end him?" "I want control," I said. "Good," she replied. "Then don't warn him." I didn't. That afternoon, I opened new accounts in my name. I moved what was legally mine. Nothing hidden, nothing illegal, just repositioned. I froze joint discretionary spending, not vindictive, precise. I changed the passwords to the financial software I managed, revoked his remote access, and documented every step. The house came next. I called a realtor I trusted and asked a simple question. "If I wanted this listed quietly," I said, "how fast could we move?" She didn't ask why. She asked when. By evening, I had a timeline. Maya watched me from the doorway while I packed his things into boxes. I didn't touch his office. I didn't throw anything away. I labeled everything carefully. Neutral. Methodical. "You okay?" she asked. "I will be," I said. "And so will you." She nodded like she believed me. The phone finally rang around 9. His name lit up the screen like it still had permission. I didn't answer. The messages came instead. "We need to talk. You embarrassed me. This isn't how adults handle things." I read them without flinching. He still thought this was about feelings, about smoothing things over, about time. By morning, he'd realized something was wrong. He tried logging into our main account. I saw the alert before his next call came through. "What did you do?" he demanded, skipping any attempt at calm. "I organized," I said. "You locked me out." "I limited access," I corrected. "You'll hear from my attorney." There was silence on the line, the kind that only appears when control slips suddenly and unexpectedly. "You can't do this without telling me," he said. "I can," I replied. And I did. His voice lowered. Isabel, you're making a mistake. I looked around the house, at the life I'd held together while he slowly stepped out of it. At the space I was finally reclaiming. No, I said. I stopped making them. He exhaled sharply. You think this makes you powerful? I think it makes me finished, I said. There's a difference. He tried one last angle. Think about Maya. I am, I said. That's why I'm not waiting for you to come back. The call ended without a goodbye. Within hours, his brother called, then his assistant, then a mutual friend who pretended to check on me while fishing for information. I gave them nothing. Silence, it turns out, is louder than explanations. By the end of the day, the locks were scheduled to be changed, the listing paperwork was drafted, and my lawyer had filed the first motions. Clean, legal, irreversible. Late that night, another message came through from him. Short this time. Please, let's slow this down. I stared at it for a moment, then set my phone face down on the table, just like he used to. He thought I'd panic, thought I'd hesitate, thought I'd wait. But while he was still trying to understand what was happening, I was already 3 steps ahead, moving forward without looking back. The shock on his end wasn't the point. Momentum was. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They spread. The first sign was his silence. After that last message, please, let's slow this down. There was nothing for nearly a full day. No calls, no accusations, no attempts to charm or intimidate. That kind of quiet doesn't mean peace. It means recalculation. I kept moving. The realtor walked through the house with quiet efficiency, pointing out what needed staging and what didn't. I approved everything. I didn't sentimentalize the walls or the memories attached to them. They had already served their purpose. At noon, my lawyer called. He contacted his attorney, she said. They're asking for access to the accounts. They'll get disclosures, I replied. Not control. She smiled audibly. Exactly. By the second day, the ripple effects reached further than our home. The woman, her, started to feel it first. I didn't contact her. I didn't need to. Mutual circles are efficient that way. A friend forwarded me a message without commentary. It was from someone at the firm. Heard things are messy. She's not coming around anymore. Not dramatic, not romantic, just inconvenient. Money changes everything. When the trips stopped being paid for, when the dinners became awkward questions, when the promises lost their backing, whatever fantasy he'd sold her began to wobble. She hadn't signed up for uncertainty. She'd signed up for a man who looked untouchable. By day 3, he wasn't. At school pickup, 2 parents approached me separately, both awkward, both careful. Are you okay? One asked. I am, I said. Neither pushed. They didn't need details. Word travels quickly when silence confirms what politeness avoids. That evening, his name came up in a conversation I overheard at a restaurant near our neighborhood. 2 men at the bar, investors I recognized, lowered their voices when they said it. Did you hear what happened? Apparently it blew up, publicly. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The story was moving on its own now. His first real consequence arrived the morning his assistant called me directly. I'm so sorry to bother you, she said, voice tight. But he can't access the project files. He says you— I manage those systems, I replied. He's been notified. There was a pause. The partners are asking questions. They should, I said. I hung up before guilt could sneak in. I'd spent years protecting him from questions. I wasn't doing that anymore. That afternoon, Maya came home quiet, not upset, thoughtful. Dad called the house, she said. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice steady. Did you answer? No, she said. I didn't want to. I nodded. You don't have to. She looked relieved. Good. That one word told me everything. Children don't need explanations when they already understand. By the end of the week, his calls returned, different now. Less authority, more urgency. I can't get into anything. he said during one call I answered on speaker Maya upstairs. You've put me in a bad position. You put yourself there, I replied. This is hurting people, he insisted. My work, my reputation. I almost laughed. Almost. You said we'd talk when you got back, I said. You didn't expect the consequences to start before then. His breath hitched. Isabel, please. That word again. Smaller now. Less confident. I'm not destroying you, I said calmly. I'm just not protecting you anymore. That landed harder than anger ever could. By Saturday, his brother stopped calling. His mother sent a careful message asking if Maya was okay. No defense, no accusations, just concern. That's when I knew the narrative had shifted. He wasn't the man inconvenienced by an emotional wife. He was the man whose stability had evaporated the moment the person holding it together stepped away. Late that night, my phone rang again. I let it ring twice before answering. I need to see you, he said. We need to fix this. There's nothing to fix, I replied. You can't just erase me, he said, desperation leaking through. I looked around the quiet house. Boxes stacked neatly, lights off in rooms that no longer belonged to him. I didn't erase you, I said. I removed myself. Silence stretched on the line, heavy and unfamiliar. When the call ended, I didn't feel triumph. I felt confirmation. The consequences had begun, and they weren't loud or cruel or chaotic. They were structural. And structures collapse slowly until suddenly they don't hold at all. The second confrontation wasn't planned by me. That's what made it cleaner. It happened at a charity dinner he couldn't skip, one of those public-facing events where absence would have been noticed immediately. He still believed showing up, smiling, and controlling the room could stabilize things. He still believed image could outrun reality. I went because I was invited. My name was still on the donor list. My seat was still at the table. The restaurant was full. White tablecloths, soft music, donors dressed in confidence. I arrived alone, calm, on time, heads turned in that subtle way people look when they've heard something but don't know how to ask. He saw me as soon as I walked in. For a split second, relief crossed his face. Like my presence meant hope. Like showing up meant reconciliation. Then he noticed I wasn't wearing my ring. That's when his shoulders tightened. We were seated at the same table. A long one. Plenty of witnesses. People he needed. People who mattered. He leaned toward me immediately. You shouldn't be here, he whispered. I was invited, I said. So were you. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I met his eyes. You made it public first. The conversation around us tried to continue. Forced laughter. Clinking glasses. Everyone pretending nothing was unfolding inches away. Halfway through the first course, the woman arrived. Not the same one from the send-off. A different version. Younger. Nervous. Late. She scanned the room like someone realizing too late she'd walked into the wrong story. He stiffened. She froze when she saw me. That was the moment everything aligned. She leaned down to whisper something to him. I didn't need to hear it to understand. He shook his head sharply, then glanced at me, panic flickering behind his eyes. I waited. When the host stood to welcome everyone and tapped the microphone, I stood too. The sound carried instantly. Chairs stilled. Forks paused. Conversations died mid-sentence. I'm sorry, I said evenly, nodding toward the host. Just one moment. Confusion rippled through the room. The host hesitated, then stepped back. No one stopped me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't explain history. I told the truth. I won't take much time, I said. But since my presence seems to have caused some discomfort, I think clarity is fair. He shook his head slightly, barely perceptible. A plea. I'm Isabel, I continued. I'm still legally married to the man seated beside me. A wave moved through the room, not gasps. Recognition. I supported his career, funded his early projects, and managed the life many of you admire, I said. What I won't do is sit quietly while he pretends this is a misunderstanding. His face had gone pale. The woman near him stared straight ahead, hands clenched in her lap. "I was told we'd talk when he got back," I said. What I realized instead is that conversations only happen when both people still have something to lose. I turned slightly toward him, not for permission, for precision. "You don't," I said. "That's why this ends tonight." Silence pressed down hard and unmistakable. Someone near the end of the table shifted uncomfortably. A phone lifted subtly. Another followed. The woman beside him stood abruptly, chair scraping loud against the floor. "I can't do this," she said, voice shaking. Not to him, to herself. "I didn't know it was like this." She grabbed her purse and walked out without looking back. That was the sound people would remember. The chair, the footsteps, the door. He reached for my arm. I stepped away. "Don't," I said, again. I picked up my glass, steady. "To be clear," I added, addressing the room, "I won't be answering questions tonight, but I won't be disappearing either." I smiled then, small, controlled. "Enjoy your dinner." I sat back down, just like that. No shouting, no tears, no chaos, just aftermath. People avoided his eyes. Conversations restarted in broken pieces. The host cleared his throat and tried to salvage the evening, but the atmosphere had shifted permanently. He didn't speak to me again. He couldn't. By the time dessert arrived, half the table had changed seats. By the time checks were requested, his phone was lighting up non-stop. Messages he didn't open, calls he didn't answer. When I stood to leave, several people stopped me quietly. "I'm sorry," one woman said. "You handled that with grace," another whispered. One man simply nodded. "Respect," he said. He stayed seated. Small now, contained, exposed. As I walked toward the exit, I heard someone behind me repeat the line, "That's why this ends tonight." I didn't turn around. By the next morning, everyone who mattered would know exactly who he was. And he would finally understand something he should have learned earlier. Public lies don't survive calm truth. Especially when the truth stands up, speaks once, and walks away. The backlash didn't explode. It unfolded. That was the part he didn't understand. By Monday morning, the charity dinner wasn't a rumor. It was a reference point. People didn't ask what happened. They asked if it was true. That distinction matters. Questions fade. Confirmations don't. He tried to get ahead of it. A carefully worded message went out from his office before noon. I saw it because 3 different people forwarded it to me within minutes. It framed the situation as a private marital matter, praised my years of support, and asked for discretion while he and I worked things out. Worked things out. The phrase landed like an insult. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't contradict him. I didn't correct the record. I released facts, not all at once, not emotionally. Just enough to make his version impossible to maintain. My lawyer filed motions that same day, routine on paper, devastating in effect. Asset disclosures became public record, timelines emerged. Dates lined up in ways his statement couldn't survive. Nothing dramatic, just clean, chronological truth. Then the screenshots surfaced, not from me, from someone else. A former colleague of his, apparently tired of being dragged into silence, leaked a handful of messages that confirmed what people already suspected. Nothing obscene, nothing sensational, just casual arrogance, assumptions of immunity, plans made without concern for consequences. It spread quietly at first, then faster. By Tuesday afternoon, his name was no longer paired with opportunity. It was paired with risk. Investors hate uncertainty more than scandal. Boards hate distraction. Partners hate liabilities they didn't approve. I didn't comment when a local business blog published a short piece about leadership ethics and personal conduct impacting public trust. I didn't need to. The implication did the work for me. He called me that night. Not angry, not pleading, strategic. "We need to coordinate," he said. "This is getting out of hand." "I didn't start it," I replied. "And I'm not stopping it." You're letting people destroy me. No, I said calmly. I stopped protecting you. That sentence followed him everywhere after that. Someone quoted it anonymously online. Someone else repeated it at a meeting he wasn't invited to anymore. By Wednesday, the woman from the dinner had scrubbed her social media. Her accounts went private, then inactive. Whatever promise he'd made her dissolved the moment she became visible in the fallout. His brother stopped returning his calls. His mother sent another message, this one careful, apologetic, asking if Maya was safe from all of this. She was. Because I hadn't made this personal. I'd made it factual. At the end of the week, a hashtag appeared. Not viral, not dramatic, just persistent. A phrase pulled from the charity dinner, reframed without names. Calm truth travels. It showed up under posts about leadership, under articles about integrity, under a photo someone had taken that night, me standing, microphone in hand, composed. He tried one last push. A mutual friend called, voice strained. He says you're being unreasonable, that this is about punishment now. I paused before answering. It's about consequence, I said. Those aren't the same thing. That friend didn't argue. By Friday, his firm announced an internal review. By Sunday, he'd been quietly removed from 2 committees. No headlines, no drama, just absence. He left another voicemail, long, rambling, defensive. It ended with, "You're enjoying this." I deleted it without listening again. Enjoyment had nothing to do with it. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage. It was exposure fueled by truth. He'd built his life on the assumption that my silence was permanent. When silence ends, it doesn't shout. It documents. And once the documentation exists, there's no narrative strong enough to erase it. By the time he realized the escalation couldn't be spun, couldn't be managed, couldn't be undone, the damage was already structural. He was still trying to explain. Everyone else had already moved on. Without him. The legal process didn't feel dramatic. It felt surgical. Once the filings were in motion, everything slowed down and sharpened at the same time. Emotions stopped mattering. Facts took over. Timelines, numbers, ownership, responsibility. I'd spent years organizing our life so well that dismantling it was simply the reverse process. My lawyer called it clean separation. That was generous. The first hearing was procedural, short, quiet. No raised voices, no spectacle. He showed up late, suit wrinkled, eyes rimmed red like he hadn't slept. I arrived early with my attorney, notes prepared, posture steady. The judge barely looked at us as individuals. We were a case file now. That's when it hit him. This wasn't something he could talk his way through. Temporary financial orders came down fast. Accounts stayed frozen. Spending limits were enforced. He was granted a stipend that barely covered his rent. I saw his jaw tighten when the numbers were read out. For the first time in our marriage, he had to ask permission to access money he once assumed was his. Custody was next. Maya didn't testify. She didn't have to. Her routine, her school stability, her therapist's notes, everything pointed in one direction. Primary custody to me. Visitation structured, supervised at first, not as punishment, but because instability has consequences. He objected, weakly. The judge didn't waver. Outside the courtroom, his father didn't speak to him. That part surprised me more than it should have. His father had always been a quiet man, traditional, careful about appearances. He'd funded part of my husband's education, introduced him to early investors, vouched for him when credibility mattered. He stood on the courthouse steps that day, hands clasped behind his back, and looked past his son like he wasn't there. Later, he called me. "I won't defend what he did," he said, "and I won't fund what comes next." He didn't ask how I was. He didn't apologize for his son. He simply withdrew support. That withdrawal did more damage than any argument ever could. His brother followed suit a week later. A short message, no explanation. "I can't be involved." The firm announced his leave of absence not long after. Indefinite. framed as mutual. Everyone knew better. The mistress, former mistress technically, made one last appearance through legal channels. A declaration denying wrongdoing, distancing herself, claiming ignorance. It didn't matter. Her name was already attached to instability. Clients canceled meetings. Opportunities dried up. Whatever future she'd imagined quietly stepped away from her. She didn't contact me. She didn't need to. We both understood the same thing now. Affairs don't survive daylight. By the second month, the house sold. Not at a loss. At a clean price. My inheritance portion was documented clearly. Returned. Protected. The rest was divided according to law, not entitlement. When he saw the final settlement numbers, something broke in his composure. Not rage, not tears. Shock. He'd assumed even then that something would save him. That someone would intervene. That I'd soften. I didn't. He moved out of his rental 2 weeks later. Couldn't afford it anymore. I heard through someone else that he was staying with a friend temporarily. That arrangement didn't last long. People are generous when they think you're unlucky. They disappear when they realize you're the common denominator. Maya adjusted faster than anyone expected. She stopped checking her phone constantly. Her grades stabilized. She laughed more easily. When her therapist asked her how she felt about the changes, she said something simple. "It's quieter now," she said. In a good way. That told me everything. The final hearing took place on a Tuesday morning. No crowd, no tension, just signatures and conclusions. The judge read the terms once more. Custody confirmed, asset division finalized, support obligations set. When it was over, he stood there for a moment like he expected something else to happen. An apology, a reversal, a final speech. Nothing did. Outside, he caught up to me in the hallway. "Is this really it?" he asked, voice hoarse. "After everything?" I looked at him then, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just clarity. "This is the result," I said. "The end happened earlier." He nodded slowly, like someone processing bad news too late to change it. As I walked away, I felt lighter. Not because I'd won, but because I was no longer carrying something that never belonged to me in the first place. Weeks later, I heard he'd sold his car, then his watch, then pieces of a life that had looked solid from the outside. He stopped calling, stopped trying, stopped existing in any meaningful way in my daily life. And that was the final consequence. Not humiliation, not poverty, not loneliness, irrelevance. He had believed betrayal was a private act with private risks. What he learned, too late, was that when you build your life on someone else's silence, the moment they speak, everything you stand on disappears. I didn't destroy him. I simply stepped aside and let the truth finish what it started. The last time I saw him wasn't dramatic. There was no rain, no shouting, no raised voices echoing through some symbolic place. It happened on a weekday afternoon in a neutral office downtown, the kind of space designed to drain emotion out of everything. Beige walls. Glass table. Water bottles no one touched. He asked for the meeting. I agreed because by then I had nothing left to protect. He was already there when I arrived, sitting too straight in the chair, hands folded like he was waiting to be evaluated. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not thinner exactly, just compressed, like life had folded him inward. "You didn't have to come," he said as I sat down. "I know," I replied. "You did." He nodded, swallowing. "I needed to see you." I didn't respond. Silence invites honesty faster than questions. For a moment, he just stared at the table. Then he laughed softly, without humor. "I keep thinking there's something I could say that would change how this ends." I met his eyes. "This already ended." "That's what you think," he said quickly, leaning forward. "But we have history. A family. You can't just erase all of that." "I didn't erase it," I said. "I outgrew it." His face tightened. "You're acting like I'm nothing." "I'm acting like you're finished," I corrected. "There's a difference." He shook his head, voice rising. "You don't understand what you've done to me." I almost smiled at that. Almost. You lost money, I said evenly. You lost access. You lost control. None of that happened to you by accident. He ran a hand through his hair. I made a mistake. No, I said. You made a decision, over and over again. I said I was sorry. You said you'd talk when you got back, I replied. That told me everything. His eyes flickered. That line again, the one he couldn't escape. I didn't think you'd do all this, he admitted. That's because you never listened to me, I said. You listened to how quiet I was and assumed that meant weak. He exhaled sharply, frustration bleeding through. So what now? You win? You walk away while I pick up the pieces? I leaned back in my chair, calm, grounded, finished. This isn't a competition, I said. It's a boundary. A boundary? He scoffed. You destroyed my life. I held his gaze. You handed it to me already broken. Silence settled between us again, heavier this time. He looked at me like he was searching for something familiar, an opening, a crack, a version of me he could still reach. I loved you, he said suddenly. I didn't flinch. You loved the life I built around you. That's not fair. It's accurate. His voice dropped. I don't know who I am without you. I nodded once. That's not my responsibility anymore. He leaned back, defeated, eyes glassy. What about Maya? She has stability, I said. She has honesty. She has a mother who doesn't lie to keep the peace. She'll hate me. I'm not teaching her that, I replied. You are. That landed harder than anything else. He covered his face for a moment, breathing unevenly. When he looked up again, the fight was gone. Is there any chance, he asked quietly, that one day we could start over? I stood. The movement startled him. I gathered my bag slowly, deliberately, giving him time to understand what was coming. No, I said. One word. Complete. He stood too, panic flashing. Please, he said. Don't end it like this. I stepped closer, not aggressively, not emotionally, just enough to make sure he heard me clearly. It didn't end like this, I said. It ended when you decided I'd wait. I held his gaze for a final second. You mistook my silence for permission, I continued, and my loyalty for lack of options. His shoulders sagged. I'm not angry, I said. I'm unavailable. That was the line, the one that closed everything. I turned and walked to the door. Behind me, his voice broke. Isabel. I didn't turn around. The door closed softly. No slam, no drama, just finality. Outside, the sun was bright. The city moved around me like nothing monumental had happened. And that was exactly the point. Some endings don't announce themselves. They simply stop asking for permission. And once they do, there's nothing left to argue about. A year passed without announcement. No dramatic reinvention. No sudden version of myself designed to prove anything. Life didn't explode forward. It settled. And in that settling, everything changed. Maya grew first. Not taller, steadier. She stopped flinching when phones buzzed. She stopped watching doors like someone might leave without warning. Our mornings became quiet routines instead of negotiations. Breakfast, school drop-off, music in the car. Small things that felt solid again. I returned to work on my own terms. Not as someone's support system. Not as background stability. I took contracts, then ownership. I rebuilt slowly, deliberately, with boundaries where trust used to leak. The money came back. Not all at once, but honestly. Cleanly. Mine. The house we moved into wasn't impressive. It didn't need to be. It held us without echo. Sunlight reached every room. Nothing felt staged. Sometimes people asked how I was doing. I learned to answer simply, I'm well. That word meant something now. I heard about him occasionally, not directly, always through distance. A former colleague, a mutual acquaintance who didn't know what to say. The updates got shorter over time. He'd moved again. He was looking for work. He wasn't invited anymore. Eventually, the updates stopped altogether. That's how irrelevance works. Not with punishment, but with forgetting. One afternoon, months later, Maya asked me something unexpected while we were folding laundry. "Do you ever miss him?" she asked. I considered it carefully. Not the question, but the answer I wanted her to learn from. "I miss who I thought he was," I said. "I don't miss who he chose to be." She nodded, satisfied. Then changed the subject. That's when I knew we were going to be fine. I didn't become harder. I became clearer. I stopped over-explaining. I stopped smoothing things over. I stopped absorbing discomfort so others could feel at ease. Silence returned to my life. But this time, it belonged to me. There are moments now when I think back to that night. The send-off, the lights, the line he said so casually. "We'll talk when I'm back." He thought time belonged to him. That my patience was endless. That loyalty meant waiting. What I learned is simpler. Freedom doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from choosing yourself once, and never negotiating that choice again. Betrayal didn't break me. It introduced me to the version of myself who doesn't wait for permission to leave, doesn't ask to be valued, and doesn't confuse love with endurance. And that version? She never looks back. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story moved you, surprised you, or hit closer to home than you expected, go ahead and hype the button right now. It helps this story reach the people who need it. I'd really love to hear your thoughts, or even your own experience, so share it in the comments below. You're not alone in this, and if you haven't yet, hit subscribe and the like button so you don't miss the next story.